So, you've just downloaded Mistfall Hunter, or maybe you've been watching gameplay and you're wondering what all the hype is about. You jump into your first match, loot a few chests, fight a couple of monsters, and then suddenly another player appears out of nowhere, destroys you in seconds, and everything you collected is gone. If that sounds familiar, don't worry. Mistfall Hunter isn't your typical RPG, and it definitely isn't a game where you can just rush into every fight. Success comes from understanding the game's systems, knowing when to fight, when to run, and how to survive long enough to actually extract with your loot. In this guide, I'll cover everything a brand new player needs to know, from choosing your first hunter and understanding the different game modes, to combat, looting, inventory management, PvP, and the biggest beginner mistakes that get players killed. By the end of this video, you'll have a much better understanding of how Mistfall Hunter works, and you'll be able to survive your raids much more consistently. Let's get started. Understanding what Mistfall Hunter actually is. Before we talk about weapons, classes, or gear, it's important to understand what kind of game you're actually playing. Mistfall Hunter is an extraction RPG. That means your goal isn't simply killing enemies or getting the highest score. Your real objective is simple. Enter a dangerous map, find valuable loot, survive, and successfully extract. Only then do you keep everything you've collected. If you die before extracting, you'll lose almost everything you brought into the raid. That single mechanic completely changes how you should approach the game. Every decision matters. Should you fight another player? Should you risk opening one more chest? Should you explore another room? Or should you leave while you're ahead? These choices are what make every raid exciting. Sometimes the smartest play isn't fighting at all. Learning the gameplay loop. Every raid follows roughly the same cycle. You enter the map with the equipment you've chosen. Then you begin exploring. As you move around, you'll encounter monsters guarding treasure, hidden loot containers, resource nodes, elite enemies, and eventually other players. Your objective is to gather valuable equipment while staying alive. Eventually, you'll want to find an extraction point before another team finds you. Once you successfully extract, everything you found becomes yours. You can sell it, store it, craft with it, or bring it into future raids. This creates an interesting risk versus reward system. Bringing expensive gear makes you stronger, but also gives you much more to lose. Meanwhile, entering with cheaper equipment reduces the risk, but makes difficult fights much harder. Finding that balance is something every experienced player learns over time. Choosing your first hunter. One of the first decisions you'll make is choosing your hunter. Every hunter has their own weapons, abilities, strengths, and weaknesses. Some specialize in close combat. Others excel at ranged attacks. Some provide utility for the team. Others focus on mobility or survivability. If you're completely new, don't worry too much about choosing the perfect character. Instead, focus on learning one hunter really well. Learning your abilities, understanding your cooldowns, knowing your attack range, and mastering your movement will help you far more than constantly switching between characters. Once you're comfortable with the fundamentals, then you can start experimenting with other hunters. Remember, game knowledge usually wins fights long before mechanical skill does. Learn your abilities. A mistake many beginners make is relying only on basic attacks. Mistfall Hunter's abilities are incredibly important. They often determine who wins an engagement. Spend time reading every ability description. Know what each skill does. Understand how long the cooldown is. Learn when to save it instead of using it immediately. For example, using your strongest ability on a weak monster might leave you completely vulnerable if another player suddenly attacks. Experienced players constantly think ahead. Instead of asking, "What can I kill?" they're asking, "What happens if another team appears in the next 10 seconds?" That mindset alone will dramatically improve your survival rate. Don't ignore stamina and positioning. Combat isn't only about dealing damage. Movement is just as important. Dodging attacks, managing stamina, using cover, breaking line of sight, and repositioning during fights often makes the difference between surviving and dying. Many new players panic once combat begins. They spam attacks, spam abilities, drain all their stamina. Then they're unable to dodge incoming attacks. Instead, try staying calm. Watch enemy attack animations. Move deliberately. Only commit when you know it's safe. You'll take far less damage, especially against tougher PvE enemies. Understanding gear. Gear is your biggest investment. Weapons improve your damage. Armor increases survivability. Accessories often provide useful bonuses that can completely change your effectiveness. But here's something every beginner needs to remember. Higher rarity doesn't automatically mean better. A legendary weapon doesn't help much if you don't know how to use it. Meanwhile, a player with average gear and excellent positioning can easily defeat someone wearing expensive equipment, especially in extraction games. Your skill matters just as much as your inventory. That's why many experienced players recommend avoiding expensive loadouts until you're consistently extracting. Think of your gear like an investment. Only risk what you're willing to lose. Don't hoard everything. One common mistake beginners make is filling their stash with random items. Not every piece of loot is valuable. Some resources are used for crafting. Some are needed for quests. Others are simply vendor items. As you play more, you'll begin recognizing what's worth keeping and what should be sold immediately. A clean inventory makes gearing up much faster before every raid. If your stash is constantly full, you'll spend more time organizing than actually playing. Develop the habit of cleaning your inventory after every successful extraction. Future you will appreciate it. Mastering PvE combat. Now that you understand the basic gameplay loop, it's time to talk about the enemies you'll be fighting throughout every raid. At first glance, PvE enemies might seem like simple obstacles standing between you and valuable loot, but that's not really the case. Every monster serves two purposes. First, they guard treasure, resources, and key areas of the map. Second, and this is something many beginners don't realize, they create noise. Every sword swing, spell cast, explosion, or prolonged fight can attract nearby players. Remember, you're rarely alone in a raid. If another team hears you fighting a powerful elite enemy for 30 seconds straight, there's a good chance they'll come investigate. Sometimes they'll wait patiently until you're low on health before attacking. This is one of the oldest tricks in extraction games. So while clearing monsters is necessary, try to do it efficiently. The faster you eliminate enemies, the less attention you'll attract. Learn enemy attack patterns. One of the biggest mistakes new players make is assuming every enemy can simply be rushed. That's rarely true. Most enemies have attack animations that clearly signal what's coming next. Some perform slow but devastating overhead attacks. Others attack multiple times in quick succession. Some even have area of effect abilities that punish players who refuse to move. Instead of focusing only on your own attacks, start watching your enemy. After a few raids, you'll begin recognizing attack patterns naturally. Eventually, you'll know exactly when to dodge, when to block if your class allows it, and when it's safe to counterattack. Once this becomes second nature, you'll notice that you're taking far less damage, which means you'll spend fewer healing resources and be much better prepared if another player suddenly appears. Elite enemies are high risk, high reward. As you explore, you'll eventually encounter stronger elite monsters. These enemies usually have significantly more health, deal much more damage, and often possess unique attacks that regular enemies don't have. Naturally, they also tend to guard much better rewards. Before engaging an elite enemy, ask yourself a few questions. Have you already heard players fighting nearby? Is your inventory already full of valuable loot? Sometimes killing the elite is absolutely worth it. Other times, it's smarter to extract safely instead of risking everything for one more reward. Every container. While that sounds logical, it often wastes valuable time. The longer you stay inside a raid, the more dangerous it becomes. Other players continue moving across the map. Extraction zones become more contested. Resources become scarcer. Instead of looting every single object, prioritize high-value locations. Elite enemies. Locked treasure rooms. Special event areas. Rare chests. These usually provide much better rewards than dozens of common containers. Efficiency is far more important than quantity. A player who spends 10 minutes collecting valuable loot often extracts richer than someone who spends 25 minutes picking up everything they find. Inventory management during raids. Sooner or later, your inventory will become full. When that happens, don't automatically head for extraction. Take a moment to compare what you're carrying. If you find an item that's significantly more valuable than something already in your bag, replace it. This is something experienced extraction players constantly do. Think of your inventory like limited real estate. Every slot should earn its place. As you become more familiar with item values, making these decisions becomes much easier. Understanding PvP. Now let's move on to what many players consider the most exciting and most intimidating part of Mistfall Hunter. Player versus player combat. Unlike fighting monsters, PvP is unpredictable. Players adapt. They reposition. They retreat. They bait abilities. They heal. And they'll punish mistakes much faster than AI enemies ever could. The first rule of PvP is surprisingly simple. Don't force every fight. Just because you see another player doesn't mean you should immediately attack. Ask yourself, do they know you're there? Are they fighting monsters already? Do you have the advantage? Do you have enough healing? Can you escape if things go wrong? Sometimes patience is your strongest weapon. The power of positioning. Good positioning wins fights before they even begin. Whenever possible, avoid fighting in open spaces. Use walls, rocks, ruins, doorways, and elevation to limit the angles enemies can attack from. If ranged players can't see you, they can't shoot you. If melee players have to chase you through narrow passages, you control the engagement. Think of positioning as another piece of equipment. It doesn't take inventory space, but it can be more valuable than legendary armor. Don't panic during PvP. One thing almost every beginner does is panic the moment another player appears. They instantly use every ability, every cooldown, every healing item, everything. Experienced players expect this. Sometimes they'll intentionally pressure you just to make you waste your strongest abilities. Instead, stay calm. Watch what your opponent is doing. React instead of guessing. If they dodge, don't immediately chase blindly. If they retreat, ask yourself whether they're actually escaping or trying to lure you into an ambush. Patience often wins fights. Third parties are everywhere. Here's another mechanic you'll quickly learn. Third parties. Imagine you're fighting another player. Both of you are low on health. You've used most of your healing. Suddenly, another team arrives. Now everyone becomes an easy target. This happens constantly in extraction games. Whenever a fight lasts too long, expect someone else to investigate. That's why ending fights quickly is so important. The longer you're exposed, the greater the chance another squad joins the battle. Knowing when to run. One lesson every successful extraction player eventually learns is this. Escaping is not losing. Sometimes the smartest decision is simply leaving. Maybe you're carrying rare loot. Maybe you've already completed your objective. Maybe your healing supplies are almost gone. If another team attacks under those circumstances, retreating may be the correct play. Remember, your goal isn't getting the most kills. Your goal is successfully extracting with valuable loot. Survival is always profitable. Dead heroes earn nothing. Playing solo versus playing with friends. Mistfall Hunter can feel very different depending on whether you're playing alone or with teammates. As a solo player, stealth becomes much more important. Avoid unnecessary fights. Listen carefully for footsteps. Use the environment to your advantage. And never underestimate the value of simply avoiding stronger teams. Playing in a group changes everything. Communication becomes your strongest weapon. Calling enemy positions. Sharing healing resources. Focusing the same target. Warning teammates about incoming threats. Good teamwork often defeats mechanically stronger opponents. If you're playing with friends, constantly share information. Silence during combat usually creates confusion. Understanding the economy. One of the biggest adjustments new players have to make in Mistfall Hunter is learning that every item has value. When you first start playing, it's easy to think, this weapon looks cool, I'll keep it, or I might need this resource someday. Before long, your stash is overflowing with random gear, crafting materials, and equipment you never actually use. Instead, think like a trader. Every item in your inventory should answer one simple question. Am I going to use this soon? If the answer is no, it's usually better to sell it and build up your currency. A healthy supply of gold gives you much more freedom. You'll be able to replace lost gear, buy upgrades, and recover from bad raids much faster. Remember, losing gear is part of the game. Going broke doesn't have to be. Don't be afraid to lose gear. This is probably the hardest lesson for new players to accept. You're going to die. A lot. And that's completely normal. Many beginners become so attached to their best equipment that they never use it. They save it for the perfect raid. The problem? That perfect raid often never comes. Good gear exists to help you survive, not to sit in your stash forever. At the same time, don't bring your absolute best equipment into every single raid if you're still learning the game. A good rule is to match your gear to your confidence. If you're experimenting, use cheaper loadouts. If you're feeling comfortable and playing with friends, that's a great time to risk stronger equipment. Managing risk is one of the core skills in every extraction game. Learn the maps. Mechanical skill helps. Better weapons help. But map knowledge wins more fights than either of those. The more familiar you become with each map, the more advantages you'll have. You'll learn where valuable loot tends to spawn. You'll recognize dangerous choke points. You'll discover common player routes. You'll know where extraction points usually appear. Knowledge is one of the strongest forms of progression in Mistfall Hunter, and unlike gear, nobody can take it away from you. Audio is one of your strongest tools. If there's one setting you should never ignore, it's your audio. Sound gives you information long before your eyes do. Footsteps, doors opening, monster fights, spell effects, weapons clashing, healing animations. All of these tell a story about what's happening around you. Many experienced players wear headphones for exactly this reason. You don't always need to see an enemy to know they're nearby. Sometimes you'll hear another team fighting in the next room. That might be your opportunity to avoid them entirely, or wait until they're weakened before deciding whether it's worth getting involved. Always take a second to stop moving and listen. Those few seconds can save your entire raid. Heal before it's too late. Another mistake beginners make is waiting until they're almost dead before healing. That usually ends badly. Imagine you're at 30% health and another player suddenly jumps you. Even if you have healing items, you may not have enough time to use them. Whenever you finish a difficult fight, ask yourself one question. If another player attacked me right now, would I survive? If the answer is no, heal immediately. Think ahead instead of reacting at the last second. The players who consistently survive aren't always the best fighters. They're usually the best planners. Stop fighting every enemy. You don't need to kill everything you see. This is one of the biggest mindset changes for new players. Sometimes avoiding combat is the better decision. Maybe you've already filled your inventory. Maybe you're low on healing. Maybe you hear another team nearby. Running past a group of monsters isn't cowardly if it helps you complete your objective. Remember why you're in the raid. To extract with loot, not to clear the entire map. Every fight carries risk. If the reward isn't worth that risk, simply move on. Play around your hunter's strengths. As you become more experienced, you'll naturally develop a favorite hunter. When that happens, don't try to play every hunter the same way. A fast, mobile hunter should use speed to control engagements. A ranged hunter should keep enemies at a distance instead of brawling in melee. A tankier hunter can safely absorb pressure while creating space. Understanding your role makes a massive difference. Many beginners lose fights simply because they're forcing their hunter into situations they weren't designed for. Instead of trying to do everything, focus on doing what your hunter does best. The biggest beginner mistakes. Let's quickly go over some of the most common mistakes you'll see almost every new player make. The first mistake is staying in raids for too long. Players get greedy. They already have valuable loot, but they decide to open just one more chest, fight one more elite, explore one more room. Then they die. Learning when to leave is just as important as knowing where to loot. The second mistake is ignoring sound. Many players sprint everywhere without paying attention to what's happening around them. Slow down occasionally. Listen. Information is often more valuable than another piece of gear. The third mistake is bringing expensive gear too early. Until you're consistently surviving raids, don't risk equipment you can't easily replace. You'll progress much faster if you're able to recover from losses instead of going broke after a single death. The fourth mistake is panicking during PvP. Stay calm. Use your abilities thoughtfully. Watch your opponent instead of randomly attacking. Controlled players win far more fights than aggressive players who burn every cooldown in the first 5 seconds. The fifth mistake is forgetting the objective. Mistfall Hunter isn't about getting the highest kill count. It's about surviving. The player who extracts with valuable loot is usually the real winner. How to improve quickly. If your goal is to become a much better player as fast as possible, keep these habits in mind every time you play. After each raid, ask yourself, what went well? What got me killed? Did I overstay? Did I ignore audio? Did I waste my abilities? Could I have escaped earlier? Improvement comes from learning something after every raid, whether you survive or not. Don't focus only on your victories. Some of your biggest lessons will come from your defeats. Watch experienced players. Pay attention to how they move. Notice when they choose to fight and when they choose to avoid combat. Try copying their decision-making rather than just their aim. Mechanical skill improves with practice. Game sense improves with experience. The combination of both is what separates average players from great ones. Mistfall Hunter can feel overwhelming when you first begin. There are dozens of systems to learn, valuable loot to manage, dangerous monsters to defeat, and skilled players waiting around almost every corner. But don't let those early defeats discourage you. Every experienced player started exactly where you are now. They lost gear. They got ambushed. They made bad decisions. The more you play, the more you'll recognize enemy patterns, understand the maps, make smarter decisions, and survive longer with every raid. Eventually, things that feel stressful today, like PvP encounters or fighting elite enemies, will become second nature. The key is to stay patient, keep learning, and remember that every successful extraction is another step toward becoming a better hunter. And that's everything you need to know to get started in Mistfall Hunter. If this guide helped you survive your first raids or taught you something new, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more Mistfall Hunter guides, tips, builds, class breakdowns, and future updates as the game continues to grow. If you have any beginner questions, or if you've discovered a useful tip that other new players should know, leave it in the comments below. Sharing knowledge helps everyone improve. Thanks for watching, good luck out there, and I'll see you in the next one.